Okay, hello, and welcome to this eCampus news webinar, Strategies and Proven Methods for Selecting a Trusted Third-Party Solution Provider. My name is Kevin Hogan. I'm the editor-at-large for eCampus, and I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's event is brought to you by Transact. Transact offers a highly configurable, mobile-centric campus technology ecosystem, offering span from integrated payment solutions for tuition and fees to multi-purpose campus IDs that can be used for everything from door and event access to campus commerce solutions for meal plans, mobile ordering, retail payments, and more. Transact solutions empower administrators to elevate the student experience and cultivate loyalty well past graduation, all while reducing complexity for students, families, and staff. Very pleased to have with me an esteemed panel. Starting with, we'll talk to Monique Paulus. Monique is the Assistant Treasurer at Carnegie Mellon University, where she provides strategic leadership in the areas of debt and cash management and treasury operations, as she also directs changes to the financial processes and technology. Notably, she oversees the university's payment card acceptance program to maintain security, enables submission of compliance reporting, and reduce scope to limit risk, cost, and administrative burden to the university. Monique has over 15 years of experience in financial planning and forecasting, capital planning, acquisition and divestiture management, and operational finance. Also with us today, Becky Kello. Becky is the Assistant Director of Treasury Services at Western Washington University in beautiful Bellingham, Washington, which is about 20 miles south of the Canadian border and about 50 miles from also beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. Becky began her career at Western 15 years ago, bringing with her years of experience as a revenue auditor for the state of Washington and various customer service responsibilities in the banking and insurance industries. Also with us today, Mike Sullivan, Vice President of Sales of Integrated Payments at Transact Campus, as well as Brian Jurwitz. Brian is the Chief Operations Officer at Arrow Payments. Everybody, thanks so much for taking the time to join with us today. Before we go to our conversation, though, I'd like to take a minute for our audience to go over some of the features of the platform that we're using. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end for our speakers to address any questions you may have. There's also a chat function that you can launch. Those are for technical questions you might have for the eSchool News team, but please don't use that to ask questions of the speakers. There's also closed captioning available by clicking on the CC tab. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, I'd just love to dive right into a conversation. We've already had a great couple conversations before leading up to get to the meat of what we're going to talk about today, but maybe we'll start with Becky and Monique and just kind of generally talk about the current challenges that you're facing related to software, in-person, and e-commerce payments on your campuses. Maybe Monique, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Right now, we actually have a pretty good structure set in place, but I guess what I'd like to mention is that probably historically, I'll call it 5-6 years ago, CMU had a homegrown e-commerce platform. And our biggest challenge at that point was keeping up with the ever-changing PCI compliance requirements and keeping our systems up to date. I'm sure many on this call know PCI is vast and it's complicated, and it was taking a lot of dedicated resources to manage that body of work. So we decided to use our resources differently, and about 5 years ago, outsourced our platform to CashNet with Transact, so that we can more efficiently handle this challenge. But the change has also garnered, beyond PCI compliance, a lot of other positive outcomes. We have a lot more centralization, which is hard to manage sometimes in a higher ed type of environment. And we often use the general ledger feed that goes between our e-commerce and our financial platforms to bring about increased data automation.
Yeah, we're probably similar to Monique here at Western. we use Transact and have used Transact since 2008, but only the e-commerce solution since about 2010. But probably the biggest challenge is even though we're pretty centralized with all of our payments, theoretically, we do have departments that'll go out and decide that they want something, and they decide what they want and then bring it to us at the contract signing stage. And that's when we have to, bring in the is it PCI compliant? Is it going to work? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? Of course, by that time, it's a little late. So we just kind of try to work it out with them and make sure that we get some things in place if it's not quite where we want it to be. But all of our e-commerce has totally helped with student experience, I think, helped with some previously manual processes that we've had, paper forms following students from a department to our cashiering office to back to the department. We've put those online, so that's helped, I think, improve the student experience, although they're not knocking on my door to tell me that. But I'm pretty sure that it has, despite I had one department who told me that they like doing that because that's how they build up a rapport with their students. And I'm like, no, you're not building a rapport with your students, making them do that. But anyway, I think there's always going to be challenges, because technology is changing all the time. So it's just something that we have to try and keep on top of, which can be very challenging to know what the latest and greatest is, and try to be ahead of the questions that come through from our students. Can we use Venmo? Can we use Square? Can we do this? And all those things. It's super challenging, super challenging.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the student experience a little bit more deeply, Becky, there, especially during these the crazy times. I hate talking about the pandemic. It's still here. It's still affecting all of us, but also especially students on campus, or maybe some who are now more remote than usual, or hybrid setups. How has the recent tumult affected the student experience when it comes to using these sort of technologies?
Well, because of COVID, there are some blessings that have come out of that, the whole pandemic. And one of them was opening the eyes of departments who are like, I've got a student who has to pay this fee. And in the past, they would take a check and then bring it, or send the forms back and forth. And we're like, we've got a great solution for you. And we'd set up an e-market site for them. So we did increase the number of sites that we had out there with COVID. That kind of helped that and pushed that along. Because departments really, and in those cases, they weren't looking for some major solution for themselves, just an easy way for students to make payments.
Sure.
I'll
Monique,
second that. Yeah, I was going to say, I'll second that. I felt very fortunate to have an established e-commerce solution that was running and generally known throughout the campus, existing processes and controls in place, so that when people came with fast moving challenges, it was one thing that I could trust and say, you know what, I think this is going to help you. And I didn't have to worry that I thought something was going to fail. We were very used to store setup processes. So it really helped us when we were in those types of binds. And then, similar to what Becky just said, some folks are not coming back from that. They're saying, well, now I have this easier way to do things. And now I see and I believe all the benefits that I've heard of why we don't need to have the check in the form walk down to the cash operations office when we can just do this all online. And so, or card present solutions, that we definitely have a place for card present solutions in our campus, but some groups have just given us back their terminals and said, we weren't using these for the past 2 years. We found other ways. We don't need these anymore.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mike and Brian, do those stories resonate with stories you're hearing in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. It's funny that a couple of things that Monique and Becky mentioned are things that we hear every day from campus administrators across the country. Going back to the student experience, one of the things that we consistently hear now more than ever is that that payment experience actually it's one of the first things that a new student or a parent uses or interacts with from an institution. So as they are thinking about, I'm interested in attending this particular institution, the application process is done early on, which typically has a payment tied to it. After they do the application, they're accepted. A lot of times they're putting in deposits for tuition or for housing. So it's very early on that a student or parent interacts with the technology on campus. And that's a first taste before that student's fully committed to the institution of what the systems might be like. And it gives them an impersonation of what it's going to be like for the next 4 or 5 years for that particular student. Monique mentioned that there's a lot of gaps in, I'd say, knowledge around PCI compliance and NACHA compliance. And those regulations and that everybody needs to follow change consistently. And the institution, their main business is to educate students, and it's not necessarily to follow these rules, but it's part of the whole process. So it's a challenge. So these systems being state of the art, being integrated with the student information system and the finance system, they're really key for all of our clients and the folks that we're talking with.
I would just add that, at Aero Payments, we're trying to help schools figure out what those solutions are. So, going through and evaluating all the different departments, when you think about athletics to, dining to fundraising to parking to healthcare systems, I mean, you name it, all of those different departments have different solutions and payment needs. And in most cases, they're trying to move more of those payments online as a result of COVID. And so we're helping them evaluate those options, set them up and manage them. But at the same time, they're trying to reduce fraud. So as you move more payments online, you're seeing more schools get hit with card testing and some of these other issues where, they have to figure out, how do I protect myself? What are the right settings? How do I make this process, sort of frictionless to accept payments, but also not expose me to fraud and people coming through and hitting our website? And for in-person payments, it's, Apple Pay, Google Wallet, touchless payments, mobile payments. Most of these schools have been able to operate on just standalone terminals over the years, and now students are expecting more. And technology and the advancement of technology is creating more opportunities, but it's not easy to change when you're a large institution.
Yeah, now Mike mentioned PCI validation. Becky and Monique, talk a little bit about whether you guys use P2PE, point-to-point encryption, for all typed and swipe payments. Becky, maybe you can tell us first.
We do not use not all of our devices are P2PE. Our main cashiering is, we still have some FD130 terminals out there that are like P2PE. The bank says they're good with the software that's on there, but still couldn't get them to send me a letter attesting to that, but go figure. I figure since they're the ones testing to our compliance, it's good. But anyway, those are pretty much the only ones. We've actually had our foundation has initiated Bluefin devices for their phonathons, which of course we haven't been able to use because they were implemented just before COVID and that shut the door there. So we haven't had any transactions through there yet, but that went through. And hoping to do some mobile payments right now. We're doing cellular through Transact and through iPads and that, and hoping to progress on that one and get that one rolling a little bit better and get the P2PE devices for those. But no, we do want them. Our IT department is sure that if we have all P2PE devices, we don't have to worry about PCI. No. Anyway.
That's wishful thinking, right?
Yes.
At Carnegie Mellon, we're in a similar situation as Becky. We aren't all P2P devices. I think that's a function of, at universities, we're very cost conscious. The fact is that a lot of the devices that are out there and deployed are still functioning, and people are used to the PCI burden that they bear with them. We offer a lot of support through the treasurer's office in conjunction with information security to help them through that process. That being said, we have definitely pushed that as machines are turning, that people are, I don't even want to say heavily considering, we're really only offering them P2PE solutions because we do believe the lesser of the burden and the incremental risk mitigation is so important. And nowadays, a lot of those devices, there's not a huge price differential. They function just as nice, if not nicer, than some of the older devices. So I think it actually is a pretty easy sell. The harder part is, getting those in circulation that just don't need to be changed into your pike.
Right. Yeah, we are like Monique said earlier, we have some departments that, weren't taking in-person payments at all during COVID. And now they're like, well, I don't know if I wanted to go back to that. And they've had FD130 terminals and they're like, they still have them at the moment. I don't think they've made a final decision, but I'm like, sure, if you want to go take them all online, that's totally fine with me. So less for me to manage. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's interesting. At this point, I think I'd like to bring in the audience a little bit and ask a few questions of you. So the folks here at Transact can kind of get an idea of where you are when it comes to these issues. Chris, if you could push the first poll question, please. So poll number 1, are you looking for guidance for PCI compliance? Sounds like Becky and Monique, you don't need any. It seems like you're pretty on it, but as you said, I mean, there's always an evolving bit of technology and technique that you have to be on top of, right?
Yeah, well, I'm other than a couple of IT partners that I have, I'm pretty much a one-man show, and I've got a whole lot more responsibility than just PCI. So it's challenging, and been working on our PCI program for 5 years, and it's still not anywhere where it needs to be.
Yeah.
I have the benefit of an amazing internal resource. I work very closely with our QSA and still would take PCI guidance advice from just about any smart resource, because I think that it's very important to hear different perspective views, because all of us have our own types of environments that are all very different. And sometimes you can find very useful information from a new lens.
Sure.
Right.
So question number 2, Chris, if you could pull that up, please. Do you currently accept international bank transfers and or international credit cards? So that's a question out to the audience. But maybe while you answer, I'll ask that same question of Becky and Monique. Do you guys have international platforms set up?
Well, I shouldn't say not specifically. We actually have Western Union connected to Transact for our international students. And then for those, we actually are on an outside terminal or an outside link. We also offer Flywire. It's a long story. So they have a couple of ways that they can make payment that way. But yeah, and I think both of them take credit cards. And even if they don't go, Transact accepts international credit cards. So yeah, if they want to pay the fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carnegie Mellon also takes international ACHs or credit cards. We try to encourage folks to look more at the ACH options just because of the cost differentials. As Becky said, some people, they want the convenience of what they want, and so they're willing to pay that. But it's a complicated payment challenge. So CMU has a very heavy international population. And so it's, to be able to offer domestic students and international students similar payment options is important to us, because we think that that's a fair and equitable way to handle business, when we have this, we know we have users in both worlds, but it's a challenge. I think that it's great to learn more from again, from the teams here about the best way to do that.
Sure. And now the third and final question, please, Chris. Question for the audience. Are you looking to choose a payments provider in the next 12 months? And Becky and Monique, I'll take you off the hot seat on that one. You don't have to talk about that. Although I think just like anything else with the technologies and techniques, you just have to be constantly looking at providers and the best services that are out there in a ever-changing universe, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
So I'd like to thank the audience for answering those questions. I think it will be a good insight for the folks here at Transact. And I'd also, again, encourage anyone, if you have a question or an idea, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and I will pass them along to add to the conversation. But in the meantime, we can go on and maybe talk a little bit more about goals. Monique, maybe some of the goals that you may have when we talk about getting into a greater PCI compliance.
Yeah, I mean, so staying PCI compliant is always a goal for the university, but also using our payment card practices to increase automation and improve user experience really drive business decisions and business process changes. I know right now, one of the things that we're working on implementing to our existing e-commerce platform is the ability for our domestic students to be able to pay with either credit card or ACH. So again, you know, kind of keeping that lens on the cost of doing business, not just for the university, but also for the student is very important to us. And you'll hear me say data automation over and over again. The value of getting your information into your system consistently in the same format with the same provided information really can link you into a lot of other processes that can, you know, you can find efficiencies in your workforce. And so we're, especially in finance, we're very focused on that right now because just like everybody else, we're doing more with less. We're doing more with less, not the other way around. And so we have found a ton of benefit that I don't even know we would have really, I don't know that was part of the original goal of the implementation, but is really one of the most important parts of it for me now.
Yeah, Becky, any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, like Monique, we're always looking to tighten the ship with PCI compliance, and things change and departments are rogue and go out and do things. You got to rein them in. But yeah, and anything we can move to Transact really through the e-commerce. Student payments are already done that way and have been for a long time. The fact that they're integrated with Banner for us and real-time postings is just so great. It's helped with a lot of gained a lot of efficiencies with bank reconciliations and things like that because the data's there. Sometimes I go to Transact for data because it's sometimes easier to get out of there than it is out of Banner, and definitely quicker because I know it a little bit better. But yeah, we're always looking for things to improve on and make things better and more efficient for folks and improve the student experience. Looking at, you know, ways to do mobile cashiering, I'll just use that term, for students because there's so many little events here and there that people want to accept payments. And I certainly don't want them writing credit card numbers down. And, you know, the university, it hasn't come from on high, but especially after COVID, everybody wants to get their hands off of actual cash and currency. So they want to get out of that. And anyway, that's kind of what we're looking at is how do we reduce that cash footprint and checks and how do we get it more automated?
Great. Now, Mike and Brian, we asked the audience and as well as Becky and Monique about the international aspect and using international payments. Talk a little bit about your perspective on that most recently, and I guess specifically during this time of COVID.
Sure. Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. Being in this space for about 15 years, I've seen a lot of kind of twists and turns. And when I think back to, you know, early days, international payments just, it was something that was not something that everybody was talking about, and they were probably always needed, but it wasn't kind of front and center. And today, it's very different. The world feels flat, so to speak. So international payments are always something that, we're getting asked about, we're talking about, and providing more payment options and flexibility to students, and all students, not just the domestic, but international students, is increasingly, more important. And especially at a place like Carnegie Mellon, where, Monique's got such a high, enrollment of folks from abroad. So that conversation continues to be front and center. And it's obviously a clear shift from years ago when, we would show up on campus and no one would really talk about it, talk about, hey, we're not doing much online today. We'd like to get some credit card payments online, to, to come very full circle from that to, hey, we need everything online. We need it to be state of the art. We need it integrated. We need a lot of options, and we need to make sure we're servicing any student who, whether they're based in the US or around the globe.
The biggest challenge is ultimately with international payments is, foreign currency exchange risk. And, is that a risk that you want to take as a university across all the different types of currencies that your students could be, bringing to the table? Do you want to put that cost back on the students? Do you want to accept dollars only, or do you want to accept the foreign currencies, and then are you going to exchange them back to dollars? We even talked to some schools are saying we want to set up banks in some of these foreign countries to be able to keep the money there. It's so many different ways to move that money around, and then there's the tax risks and everything else that comes with foreign currencies. That is a challenge. It's hard to keep your hands around PCI compliance, international payments, all these details, and run a university at the same time, which is why, trying to find the right experts and solutions is really key.
How about Dogecoin or any crypto? You guys using any of that yet? that'll be
We don't
coming
accept it.
Not yet. Not yet.
No.
It's coming.
We,
Well, Becky,
we actually are trying to solve that right now for one of the Ivy League schools who wants to accept crypto donations. At least if somebody's willing to give them money, they
well,
want
there you go. Yeah,
to
sure.
get it. So, but again, a whole nother set of risks in terms
Absolutely.
of.
Now, Becky, you mentioned earlier about reining in different departments and bringing in different vendors and different clients. Go a little deeper into that, about how you're integrating other vendors into your payments platforms.
Well, whenever we can, if somebody comes up with a solution that they want to use for their specific event or whatever they're collecting money for, my first question is, can we integrate it with Transact so that it comes in on the back end and then posts automatically? Because of all of the efficiencies we gain when it posts that way, it's typically a little cheaper too from a credit card fee standpoint, because those are things that we pass on to the departments. And it's a clearer picture of what that event or thing that they're doing represents, because we collect all the money and then we charge them the credit card fees. So they get a better picture, because a lot of other vendors will just, collect the money for you and then hold back their fees, and you just get the net balance. Yeah, it's challenging. There's many times that I've been brought in at the end when, oh, we've already signed the contract. Like, what? Now let's do this. Like, oh my goodness. So
you can't do that.
yeah. Well, yeah, there's one just recently where, yeah, we can connect with Transact, and then wait, that was a long time ago and we don't do it anymore. And there was it was kind of a mess. We did ultimately get them connected to Transact,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's just a lot of those, and I shouldn't even say a lot. It's just enough to be a thorn in my side. It's not like it happens every day or even every month, but it is a little bit challenging at times to deal with them. And
Monique,
we don't
does that
have
sound
anything.
familiar? Sorry.
It certainly does. I mean, I think that Brian mentioned this earlier, and I feel very similarly. We want our business partners to have what they need to run their business efficiently. And sometimes that doesn't always fit into the box that I would like it to fit into. I fully agree with Becky. The first thing that we ask is that do you do you connect into the university recommended e-commerce platform? When the answer is no, I immediately send them to Transact to have that conversation, because I haven't found yet a vendor that Transact wasn't willing to connect with. So sometimes the vendors themselves need a little bit of education. Just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't. So there's that. I try to have some conversations up front with folks from the business side, hopefully before they've signed contracts, to ask them, why do you need this new vendor? It would be nice to have some simplicity in consistent third parties, on the back end. But that being said, there's a lot of times when they do need the unique vendor, for the specific process. I use the application example. Think of all the information you're going to gather on an application. We have more than 10 different schools at the university that probably all have a different looking application. They may have unique needs. I have to adapt to that. So it's definitely a challenge. One thing that I know really heavily benefits Carnegie Mellon is that we have a very strong relationship with our contracts office. Anytime they see credit card acceptance, they tend to get the contract before it gets signed. People, feel like they want to go to legal. They don't always think they need to come to treasury or cash management. And so they go to legal, and the legal contact there sees the words credit card acceptance, immediately loops in treasury and information security. If you get your language into that contract, no matter who your partner is, they're now on the same page with what they need to do for you. And that's a really good foundation to have.
Yeah, that usually happens, but there's been a couple instances when purchasing who knows to come to me when they see that they've missed it. So it's not,
Well, and I know this is possibly a follow-up to the question, but we have found that even after sometimes you're working with a vendor and they could have been functioning well for years, doing everything you need for the business administrators as well as the business people, the stakeholders, the campus units. And then one year something changes and they just don't think that that they need to be PCI compliant or provide certain information. Another, I think, benefit of the centrally owned systems is, and I've had to have these conversations with folks. It's not fun, it's not comfortable, but your vendor is no longer holding up their end of the deal. They're no longer remaining compliant. I can shut down their store from a central repository and leave the rest of the university running as it needs to. And I do explain to folks, PCI is kind of a pass fail. You don't get a grade. You either pass or you fail. And in the strictest sense, if you're not compliant, you can be turned off of all credit card processing. So, when you're making these hard decisions, it's certainly better to let go of one store for the benefit of everybody else. And then the other thing we've done is used the e-commerce platform to essentially break the processing separate from the credit card acceptance. It's not the optimal process, but because we have Transact storefronts available to us, we can set up something that says, just because your vendor can't hold up their end of the deal, you can use them separately and then kind of break up the payment processing. And that's been a way to help people make it through while they're trying to figure out these very challenging situations that I wish upon no one.
Yeah, we've had to do that a couple of times too, have them totally separate.
Well, it certainly sounds like a complicated process when it comes to getting approvals and getting the ideas from these different departments, because I guess everyone's operating in their own silos, right? And just to kind of bring them together in that common platform. Any other implementation tips or tricks that you've discovered along the way that would help maybe break those silos down?
Well, for me, it's kind of like a sales pitch, and it's an easy sales pitch, I think, to tout the benefits that you get with using our centralized e-commerce solution, which is Transact. There's so many benefits. The direct posting, they don't have to worry about it. There's They don't have to do a JV. They don't have to, do all of that stuff. They get automatic reports of activity that's happened. So it's a pretty easy sell, but with implementation, that's part of it, and it's educating along the way. And periodically, we'll go out to the different areas, the different groups that have meetings. The colleges all have like an admin meeting once a quarter or something, and every so often we'll go out and meet with them and remind them, because turnover, remind them of what's out there and what's possibilities, and that they can use it for this and that and the other thing, rather than going out and shopping and finding something else. So implementing is the easy part. It's the getting them to come to us with their questions first is the hard part.
That's right. We use a lot of communication as well. Actually, since I've been with the university, I personally attend our PCI compliance interviews annually. And I do that not because I'm necessarily worried about the reporting, but I use that as my chance to get in front of all the business partners that are making those decisions on collecting funds. And I hear the challenges that they're having, because they're talking about their business process as part of this assessment. And then that allows me to either hear the challenges they're having, work with Mike and his team to find out if there's solutions that I need to be considering, or if I know the answer, because a lot of times, you hear the challenge and you go, man, we already have this figured out. I can just tell them right there, write to the Treasury mailbox and let me show you what we can do to fix this. But kind of, I think what Becky said, being part of their day-to-day, regularly communicating and then listening for those opportunities, it makes everybody a winner. They love to know that they're being heard. You love to, give this great solution and kind of get more of this centralization. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So would you both consider your campuses strict when it comes to limiting payment options that are being approved? Kind of do a little self-reflections. I mean, just in your descriptions and your answers there, I mean, it seems that if people have specific needs that go beyond what may be offered, that's the proof point to kind of allowing an additional vendor into what is already a pretty sophisticated process. But give us a little self reflection. Do you consider it a strict campus? Monique, I guess we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. No, I actually don't. I don't consider myself strict at all. I tried to start coming out of the gate strict, and have learned over the years that the businesses have good reasons that they're asking for things. Of course, we have some hard stops. If you're coming with a vendor and they're not going to be able to commit to remaining compliant, that's going to be a hard no. We are pretty strong. Again, we try to do a lot of education and stay very strict that people aren't accidentally creating their own terminals. I don't know if people are familiar with this idea of, taking a piece of technology that's not part of your scope and then saying, well, just go on there and go to my e-commerce platform and make your payment. And then it turns that technology into scope. So we're pretty strict against that, and spend a lot of time trying to educate people on that's a slippery slope and how easy that can happen. And I think similar to Becky, other than in some very special pre-approved processes that have a lot of rigor and extra controls around them, we don't allow anybody to write down credit cards or pass those manually. But as for the solutions, we try to remain very open-minded. If there are multiple solutions that are going to satisfy the same need, certainly we're going to try to get folks to use a similar vendor there. But a lot of times the unique vendors may have uniqueness that they can bring to the table, and we don't want our business partners to look at us as the body of no. We want them to look at us as the body of let's figure this out.
Yeah, I agreed. We're not strict. In fact, although there are times I wish we were a little more strict than, we'll just take the risk. Okay. But I'm probably like Monique, I want to say, no, you can't do that. But the culture here is, okay, well, let's see how we can make this work, even if it's not exactly really what we want. But we try to work with them. It's I do try to provide the easiest option, the cheapest option for them, which is the Transact markets. But yeah, there's just some instances where it just doesn't work. I've had some, was it some team was trying to do a jogathon or a dog lap thing where they were raising money, and it just really didn't work for an e-market. So they had some other place where they could register and do that. And then we've done hybrids where they do this part here, but they send them over here to make payment and transact. So we try to work with them. I listen a lot to what they're saying, try to think of them and give them ideas, possibilities of how they can make it work, using what we already have. And if that's really not going to work, then we start talking about other things if they haven't already gone out and done something else.
Yeah. And Mike and Brian, again, do these stories resonate with you and in your experiences and your relationship with other schools out there?
They do. A couple things that we were just talking about, strict versus flexible. We hear all the time, the strict really comes in around, hey, we've got to follow PCI compliance, those regulations, we've got to follow, stay in compliance with NACHA. But then there's flexibility because it's not unique to, Monique and Becky's campuses. These departments are coming into the folks in their roles and they're saying, hey, I need to do this. How can you help me? And those folks those departments are their customers, their internal customers, and they're kind of on the spot to figure it out. Hey, how do we stay strict and stay within the compliance that we have to follow, but give them the flexibility and the tools to take in these payments? So the very common story that we hear, and a vendor like ourselves, we follow, we're one of the main reasons people work with us is because of our ability to help schools with PCI compliance and the integration with all of these systems and providing as many flexible payment options as possible. So a very consistent story that hasn't, as these stories haven't necessarily changed over the years that I've been in this space, but they've evolved because needs and the demands of both the internal and external customers have changed.
Yeah, those are all great points. In our opinion, strict is sort of a legacy approach to PCI compliance. We still talk to schools who are using only analog or cellular terminals because they don't want to have anything on their network and not ready to step forward with point-to-point encryption. So it's either all online or it's analog or it's cellular. And with point-to-point encryption and some of the other solutions that are out there, people can provide that flexibility to their departments. They can start, accepting more payments in more ways without having to segment and penetration test their networks in order to be PCI compliant. They can, get out, find those solutions, help their departments collect more money. And with COVID impacting higher education as much as it is, revenue is critical right now. Funding is critical. So you have to find ways to move forward, leverage those solutions that are secure, and be able to evaluate these different providers, because it's also easier than ever to build technology. So if you're evaluating a third-party vendor and you ask them, how are you going to handle payments? And they said, oh, we're PCI compliant. And then the department says, oh, they're PCI compliant. They don't realize, as Monique was talking about, if you start logging in and accepting payments where you're typing those payments into the computers for your customers or for your students, you've now brought the entire university into PCI compliance issues, because now that data is on your computers, your networks, and it doesn't matter how PCI compliant your solution is. Without point-to-point encryption, you have a whole lot of other issues you now have to deal with. And so those are some of the things that departments miss, IT misses when they're evaluating some of these options.
Very interesting. But as we go into the last segment of our conversation here, I think we can reserve it for maybe looking towards the future. And also for Monique and Becky, maybe this is your opportunity to help drive the industry to some next steps, where maybe let's talk about what's on your wish list. What are some things that would be nice to have right now, but you can be willing to wait for them to become a must-have in the near future? Maybe Becky, we'll start with you on that one.
I don't know if I have any must-haves right now. Would like, and I've wanted for a number of years, the time to evaluate other e-commerce solutions so that I have them there in my toolkit to provide others. Still focusing on Transact e-commerce, but okay, so how about this one, or how about this one, so that one, they don't have to go out and search and research and figure out what's working, and they know they can rely on it being a PCI solution, that it's set, it's ready to go, it's approved. They don't have to go through a contract, and it's all ready to go. That's one of my long time wish lists. Just haven't had the time to do it. So yeah.
Monique, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, so my charge is always to limit risk, to limit administrative burden, and help manage costs with regards to the entire university, actually, as the assistant treasurer, but certainly for the payment acceptance programs. I try to consult a lot with folks. As much as I said, we're not strict, but I do try to help people understand how they can possibly not have to use as many unique vendors. You know, we have 120 or so unique payment streams coming in. I have about 90 of those in our e-commerce platform, and half of those are probably just storefronts. So they're doing it all themselves. And to me, that's a winning situation from a cost perspective, from an ease perspective. I also talk to them a lot about maybe having less stores that are more robust, trying to invest more time into an individual store and using it for multiple purposes, because that can be more efficient and can lend to a greater, end user experience, because they're spending more effort and energy on that individual store. I think I mentioned more recently, we're looking at implementing some additional modules to allow us to potentially start doing some fee sharing or taking some ACH payments directly through our e-commerce, which I think is going to be a huge win for the university with regards to fees and, again, equity between the different types of students that we serve.
Great. Hey, we actually got a question in from the audience, which I think both Becky and Monique can help us with. As someone new in finance at a university, what would be a best practice when trying to first become PCI compliant? Give some pointers there.
Yeah. So I wasn't actually with our university when the PCI program started, but I know that one of the first things that folks did is look towards a consultant that could help scope their environment. They can help you understand where your gaps are, changes you may be able to make before you start into official reporting, to streamline that process. And, also, when you're looking at PCI compliance, I would say, compliance is huge and important, but also looking at the actual underlying security and making sure everything there is tight, or where you can find benefits. So I would heavily encourage, finding someone maybe outside of the university to give you that viewpoint to at least start. And then you can go from there and decide, okay, now I know what I know. Can I do this on my own, or do I need to continue with professionals?
Yeah, I agree. I've been here for 15 years, but we've only just in the last 5 years really truly worked on PCI. And when we started working on it, learned that one of our IT folks was submitting some kind of SAQ, and we don't know who he was submitting it to, but he was doing one, and he said, we're compliant, but he had no idea what was going on out on campus. So I would highly recommend the Treasury Institute's PCI workshop. They do it annually. It is phenomenal. I can guarantee you the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of attending that, you're going to be overwhelmed. because there's so much to learn and so much to do to get a really good PCI program in place. Because like I said earlier, I'm a one-man show, so to speak, trying to deal with departments and wrangle everything in along with all of the other job duties I have. We've recently reached out to Arrow Payments to help us try and see if they can help us navigate this and get a program really solidly and in place. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. Brian and Mike, maybe you can help with some kind of guidance to provide the audience when folks are in the early stages of trying to find a payments processor. Brian, maybe we'll start with you on that.
Sure. Yeah, we've seen schools, because they've been strict historically, take more of a collaborative approach, and that seems to work well. If you just put on a PCI compliance hat and start walking around campus and you've not focused on PCI before, those departments are going to work as hard as they can to get out of those meetings quickly, give you whatever answers they think you want to hear, versus if you approach it from how are you accepting payments today? How would you like to accept payments? What would make your life easier? And never forget reconciliation as well, because not only is there opportunities to become compliant and save money on compliance, there's soft cost opportunities within your institutions where people may be filling out deposit slips today, or they may be spending a lot of time logging in and out of multiple systems from a reconciliation standpoint. But if you put on that collaborative hat and you go out and say, how can I make your life easier while also trying to be secure, you can probably find the solutions that will sort of check more boxes and really make people happier, instead of frustrated that now you're restricting how they are operating within those locations.
Yeah, one of the things I'd add is just the collaboration in the higher education space around payments and vendors is phenomenal. So that's a great place to start, is just be willing to have open and honest conversations with everyone, with your peers at the institution, with peers at other institutions, and with vendors. Everyone is wanting to help. And one of the things that Becky mentioned was always having kind of a plan B and a plan C in place. And as a vendor, when we come on campus, that open and honest dialogue, look at everything that vendors offer and learn as much as you can. You may not want or need to use all the services today, but have the conversation so that if something changes in the future, hey, this vendor can do this. I know this institution is doing things this way. So you have all these things kind of in your back pocket, so that when the time comes and might become more of a pressing need on campus, exactly who to turn to, whether it's a peer or a vendor, to have that conversation to kind of sort it out on your end.
Great. Another question that came in. What things should we consider as an institution when researching for a provider for that experience?
What
Brian,
kind of provider? I'll let Brian answer.
Well, I think Becky and Monique both touched on, obviously PCI compliance is a big one, but who's going to own like the merchant accounts for the vendors that you're bringing on board? We're constantly hearing from student groups who might want to use Venmo or Stripe or Square or PayPal or any of these other solutions, and then the funds are going to these third parties, and in many cases the vendors themselves get to sit on the university's funds for a certain amount of either days or even weeks, and you don't know how financially capable that vendor is. So is it a small startup that's now sitting on $100,000 worth of donations that came in from an event they had last weekend, and suddenly that vendor goes out of business? So you want to consider PCI compliance, you want to consider your own compliance in accessing those solutions, but also how's the money going to flow through that organization and back to you, and make sure that the funds are going to get to the university and be accounted for appropriately without creating more complexity.
And from a vendor in the space, I always tell people that really, if we look at the highest level, there's 3 reasons that people will do business with a company like Transact. One is the functional set that we could provide to the institution. So everything from top to bottom that we do. Secondly, the integration with the systems. So student systems, financial systems, and then those third-party systems that we've talked a lot about. And the last is the compliance piece, the PCI compliance and the NACHA compliance. And a lot of things can flow from those three, kind of high level bullet points. But, those are the most, three pressing things that we talk a lot about when we're meeting with various institutions.
Another quick question that popped in here. How do you handle any fees that are associated? I guess this is for Becky and Monique. Talk a little bit about the fee issue.
So we actually pay for the university recommended e-commerce platform out of our finance budgets. That helps a lot with adoption. If folks decide to use processes that maybe don't fit into our baseline recommendations or kind of for a specific use, folks would be paying for those additional touch points. And then we do charge the actual processing fees back to the individual units. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. It's not just one simple answer, but it seems to work. And I don't know, Becky, maybe you can opine because I think that it's similar in some places.
Yeah, pretty much the identical. Any credit card fees that are as a result of the e-commerce are prorated out to the different departments depending on their activity for any given month. Student payments are taken online through Transact, and we pass the credit card fees on to the students. The university absorbs any of the ACH e-check related charges that are charged by our bank. So yeah, the platform, the e-market platform with Transact is paid for centrally, so we don't pass that fee on. Because it can be a huge impediment from people to, well, I'm going to stick with my paper then if you're going to charge me this amount of money to do it online. It was like, no. So we were able to do that. But yeah, and then if they don't use the Transact e-commerce stuff, then they're paying for their own contract and they're absorbing those fees.
Got it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can chime in too, because a lot of schools are charging the fees back to students for credit cards on tuition. But we've seen approaches where some schools will set up separate merchant accounts for different departments. That way the fees only go to those departments for their merchant account fees. We've also seen schools do a blended rate where they annually look at what were all the fees across the whole school and then charge those back to the departments moving forward based on their volume. And then we've also seen some schools set fees higher than what their fees actually are to help fund PCI compliance and platforms like Transact or the people who have to work and manage all these solutions as well. So there's a number of ways to approach it.
Thank you. Well, I knew the toughest part of my job here this afternoon would be to end this conversation. There are so many aspects and so many insights that you guys have provided for our audience that we could go on for a while, but actually our time is just about up. So I'm going to wrap things up here. If you submitted a question that we didn't get to in the Q&A portion, someone from Samsung, someone will follow up with you directly from Transact. I'd like to thank our presenters today for a very informative presentation. And I'd like to thank all of the audience members as well for joining in and answering our poll questions. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with those slides. Thanks again for participating and have a great day.